Hello and welcome to this edition of TZM Global Radio. I'm your host for today, James Phillips from the UK chapter of the Zeitgeist Movement and TZM Education. Hope you're doing well out there, guys. The introduction for today's show is going to be somewhat brief because basically the subject matter of this show is an interview that I had with Stefan and Yashik from the Denmark and Polish chapters respectively about the European meeting before Christmas in Rotterdam of the Zeitgeist movement. As you can tell, it's quite a while after that meeting that this show is actually taking place, which is testament to just how little time I actually have for these radio shows nowadays, unfortunately. So that bleeds quite nicely into the huge amount of help I need from all of you guys and gals sitting out there listening to this right now. Please do come forward with radio shows. You can send them to submit@thezeitgeistmovement.com, but perhaps that email has been having some problems with it. I still need to look into that. So in the meantime, if you have sent forward some submissions or still wish to do so, you could perhaps just get in touch with me direct on Facebook. I'm James Phillips. I'm sure you'll be able to find me and send me it that way. If you are sitting there thinking to yourself, yeah, someone should go forward in the movement and interview this person or that person, shouldn't they? I have news for you. That person is you. Uh, that's the correct way of thinking about it. This happened recently with someone who came forward, and fair play to them. When I reminded them that that person was them, they went forward and they did exactly that, and they've put forward a submission. And that's the way it should be. We are a community and we need to work together. The radio shows for this movement are incredibly important. They keep us in touch with each other and the wider world and give the impression that we are still out there and still have a message to be heard by the world. So it's an incredibly important medium, but it is not a one-man show. So we need to be together on this, and I hope that that message is getting across to you all loud and clear. So yes, please do help us out. In other news, Z-Days, respectively, the global Z-Day should be going ahead in March in Greece, in Athens. That's not all fully confirmed and lined up yet, but hopefully it either will be by the time this show goes out or relatively soon. And the London event will be happening after that, April the 2nd at Birkbeck University in London. So we're still getting our speakers lined up for that event as well. But if you want to just pop that in your diaries, that would be great. And that is about it for news and everything that you need to know for now. So without further ado, we're going to get straight on to the interview between myself, Stefan, and Yash now. And there'll be no outro after this, so I'll say my goodbye now. And hope you're all doing well, and speak to you soon. Okay, here we go, guys. Thanks. Bye. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi, James.
Hey man,
Hi,
great,
James.
thanks. And you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks very much for joining me on the show, and for joining me in Rotterdam. But we'll come to that all in good time. So let's start with you, Stefan. Just would you like to introduce yourself for the TZM global audience, please?
Sure, thanks very much. Well, my name is Stefan Kengen. I am from Denmark. I've been with the movement for better part of 6.5 years, I think, since 2009. I've been functioning as the coordinator for the Danish chapter, which is rather small. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, so people are not really that into our ideas here yet because everything looks fine on the surface anyway for most people. So we have our work cut out for us here. But we are seeing a bit of progress right now in our part of the world, so that's nice. We are getting more attendance to our meetings and stuff. So, but I won't go on a tangent on that. I'll just give a great shout out to everybody around the world.
Thanks very much. And Jasiek, Yash, sorry. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. So my name is Yashik. That's the proper pronunciation, but I accept any variation. I come from the Polish Zeitgeist chapter, and Similarly to Stefan, I've been with the Zeitgeist movement since around 2008, 2009, predominantly trying to coordinate my local chapter and sometimes the global, or actually the chapter, organizing various events. Now I rather act as like I am not that active with the mainstream activities. I rather help other people to organize their activities in their local chapters, and I also help with the global initiatives when I can. And well, I think that's it. So hello everybody.
Okay, yes, great to have you on board. I'm sure everybody knows me, and if they don't by now, then they will do if they follow the movement long enough. General Loudmouth from the UK, and continuing to do these radio shows and interviews and what have you. So before we move on to the topic in question, which is the European meeting in Rotterdam at the end of last year, I suppose it would be prudent to know what actually started our journey towards that destination. So what sort of got you started thinking about the sorts of ideas that the Zeitgeist movement promotes, the train of thought, if you will? So we'll start again with you, Stefan.
All right. Well, yeah, that's a big question. I guess it's different for everyone, but I also think that I hear the same story repeated over and over when you talk to people about these things, that you kind of hit a sort of a bump in the road where stuff happens. You know, sort of like some people describe it as a bit of a wake up, or an epiphany even sometimes. For me, it was really one of my friends who talked about the Zeitgeist movies. At that point, there were two of them out there, the original one and Addendum, and I hadn't seen them or heard of them at that point. So that kind of got it started for me when I saw the first film. And the whole religion part, I just thought was awesome, and the way that it was done. I was a little skeptic about the whole 9/11 bit, and to me that's still kind of debatable. But anyway, it kickstarted the interest in, for me anyway. I've been thinking about these things for a long time, but it hadn't really focused in any way. And so when I saw the second film and the whole part with Jacques Fresco and the Venus Project, that kind of hit it home for me. It just made so much sense what the guy was saying, and I was really amazed that I'd never heard of it before. And of course, learning that there was even a movement at that point. I've never been one to get engaged socially in movements like this before, but for me, that was the point where it clicked, and I thought I had to get on board with this and try to promote this direction, which I think is absolutely feasible. It's absolutely possible for us to do much better than we're doing. But again, you have to have your lens focused, as Peter Joseph put it at one point, and to understand what all of that stuff really entails. So for me, that was the starting point, and I've sort of been on and off ever since. I'm not so active anymore. I'm doing more of on the lecture side of things. I'm trying to study more about how the brain works and do some presentations. We're going to talk about that later as well. So for me, that's mainly what I'm focusing on now. But the whole idea of the resource-based economy, I think, is not just possible, but also necessary. So, yeah.
Fantastic stuff. I agree, and I suppose my moment was similar during Addendum, when it's a funny kind of moment to have it, but when I sort of looked at the maglev trains and thought, oh, really, they can go that fast safely? Thought, surely not. And then you sort of look into it a little bit and you go, wow, they can. Well, how many other areas do we suck in? And you sort of, for me, you could only draw one conclusion, that the surrounding socio-economic system is not allowing that kind of technology to come to fruition, and therefore that has to be the problem. Yeah, that was kind of, I had a similar sort of epiphany moment, I suppose, at that point. Yashik, do you want to sort of introduce why you advocate the movement? What brought you to that kind of that understanding?
Sure, I think I share many similarities with what you have said, but actually my beginning with the movement was pretty trivial, and it was a series of very kind of big coincidences. And the trivial part was that we have just moved in, me and my girlfriend moved into a new city in Poland, and after about 2 months we basically ran out of all of the possible films that we wanted to watch, typically the Hollywood type films, and we were just browsing through our resources, and I came out with this CD that I have had for some time with some films, zeitgeist films. I didn't even know what that was. I thought that it's some kind of a conspiracy theory thing, and this kind of a funny quasi documentary. But as we had nothing else to watch, we decided to watch that, and that was the movie, the first part, which really struck me because, to be honest, at that time I was still trying to follow religion. I thought that this is the proper way, as I was brought up this way, and it really rattled my cage and it shook me up really much. And I had this choice whether to start digging deeper and check the facts that were presented in that movie, or to just kind of hush it out and pretend that it never happened. And I decided to continue this on this path. So the next day we watched Zeitgeist Addendum, and I remembered really vividly that we finished almost exactly at 3 a.m. And I just was so pumped after watching all these things, the maglev train that you've just mentioned, and all these rationally sounding and really feasible looking things that were presented there. And I couldn't sleep until probably 8 or so, and at 8 I just gave up on the idea of sleeping altogether, and I just sat at the computer, started looking out for something that I could do about it, maybe looking for people in Poland. And I found that the guy who actually created the Polish website for the Zeitgeist movement lived in the same city that we just moved into 2 or 3 months earlier. So we met, and we started meeting, we started organizing meetings, and within, I guess, 3 months, 3.5 months, we actually created our first Z Day. That was the first official Z Day in Poland. And that was 2009, I guess. And we actually managed to get even 150 people or so, which was a huge success for the short amount of time we had. And ever since then, I looked for ways to disprove some of the things that were presented in this film and presented by the Zeitgeist movement. And as you can see, I am still here. I have changed my view on many things that we present, and not in a bad way, just I got less romantic about things and less kind of esoteric about how we can introduce it, and more scientific, and I have simply more knowledge about these things. So yeah, I'm still, just like Steven said, learning about that stuff, trying to get more knowledge about it for myself, and hopefully also bring some people aboard, because whenever I have the time and the possibility, I talk with people about that, trying to introduce them to this new train of thought and this whole new world of possibilities.
That's very interesting, especially the bit where you talked about getting less romantic about it. That certainly vies with me, because I mean, I've done some of my homework, and maybe some of the perhaps individual claims laid out in some of our materials, or especially the documentaries, I might have more research to do on, because I'm not sure whether they all stand up. But it doesn't stop the overall idea, the simplicity of the scientific method for social concern in general, and more evidence based decision making happening in the realms of societal management making sense. That, to me, how are you ever going to, present a better option than using sound evidence for your decision making in any quarter of life, social, economic, or otherwise? I can't see anybody ever saying, "Oh, it's a really good idea to just believe, man." That's never really going to wash with me. So
Exactly.
so yeah, so that certainly resonates with me. So that kind of I think addresses in some way how we all found ourselves landed in Rotterdam. Each of us gave a talk. So I think that's probably a good place to start. And I'll start with mine last, I think. So about what I spoke about and what I delivered. So who wants to go first? Let's stay in order, I suppose, and go to Stefan. Is it Stefan or Stephen? You said Stephen earlier, but I swear I've seen Stefan on your Facebook. So please do correct me before continuing on.
Oh, that's quite all right. I mean, on my birth certificate it says Stefan, and I'm actually named after the Saint Stephanus. I'm also of Catholic upbringing originally, so I've been indoctrinated into that as a child, and had a lot of fun with it. But I also gave up on it at some point. It just became too ridiculous to me. But I mean, that's a personal choice. Anyway, Stefan is my name, but you know, it's a little bit more international to go by Steven, and I've had an artist name. I'm a musician, a producer. So I've had an artist name for a long time, just Stephen Keen. That everybody can pronounce that, so it's really up to you what you call me. I'm okay with everything.
Great. Okay. So yeah, back onto to topic and your talk that you gave, Stefan. Or would you like to just sort of outline briefly what that was about, how it went down, and I suppose if you can include any highlights of in general to get us started off with from the event in Rotterdam, that would be great.
Well, sure, yeah. Like I said before, I've been spending more and more time in the realm of brain research because I think that's extremely fascinating. And speaking of religion, if you look into neuroscience and where we are these days, scientifically speaking, there is a growing consensus on how the brain works, and how the brain is not something that conjures up decisions or does things by its own volition, but it's a series of causal events that make stuff happen even within the brain. So even if it makes us uncomfortable to think about, we have to question these long-standing myths about how we are accountable for our actions, and how we generally consider ourselves, and the way that we move about on this planet. So I find this immensely interesting, and I pursue knowledge in that realm because I think that the more we understand about our reaction patterns and how our brains actually function, the better we will be at arriving at more sane decisions, to use a fresco term. So I did a talk back in March in Berlin on the Z-Day about how the brain deceives us on a daily basis, kind of in a top-down way. So because these topics are very, very dense, and it's something that requires a lot of again, brain matter, if you will, to go into and to study. So I'm just a layman, and I don't have any formal education in these fields. So to me, I'm trying to sift through the information that's there, and provide us with the sources to that information. So that's basically what my talks are about. So what I did in Rotterdam was sort of a part 1.5 to that. I wanted to expand a little on the topics because many people came up to me afterwards in Berlin and said that was very interesting, but how do we actually apply this stuff? You know, how can we use this in our daily lives to get better at what we're doing? And so I gave that a lot of thought, and so I've kind of moved into a bit of all this mentalism, and how we are deceived by, you know, both very deliberately and also very undeliberately on a daily basis, to everything from advertising to the way that we're communicating with each other. So I wanted to expand on that, and to be honest, it takes a long time to get into that realm where you really want to be able to show people how they are being manipulated. You have to do that by actually manipulating them, and that takes time to learn how to do. So what I did in Rotterdam was sort of a 1.5, an intermediary thing. It was only about 20 minutes, and I tried to show a little bit about how we can influence our decision-making processes by nudging, and there are different techniques that are used in psychology to make this happen in people. It's what so-called hypnotists are doing, and what mentalists and magicians and so on are doing. So they're messing with our minds, and I wanted to show people how easy that actually is to do, and how easily we are fooled because of the way our brains work. So raising awareness about that, I think is very important, so that we can get better at debating our own idiosyncrasies and our own misunderstandings and misconceptions, and getting better at challenging ourselves so that we can arrive at more sane decisions. So yeah, in short, that's what the lecture was about, what the presentation was about, and I'm hopefully going to be doing the part 2, the full version of it, at this coming Z-Day in Greece in March. So I'm still studying for that, and I'm hoping I can woo the audience even more next time. So yeah.
It sounds fantastic, and your talk in Berlin was brilliant, especially the opening gambit with that video at the beginning, which kind of fools everyone with how many changes they make in the room. If you're out there and you haven't seen Stefan's talk from Berlin Z-Day 2015, I highly recommend going and checking it out. And although I have actually just offered a spoiler for the very good introduction, so apologies for that. I think something that that really comes across with the angle that you've taken as well with these things, Stefan, is the humbleness that it delivers. I think humanity could certainly do with a very, very big dose of humble pie. We do love to think that we are so right all the time, and I think that your talks help to show just how easily we're fooled, how easily our brains can trick us and deceive us. And if we started to understand that and started to understand that's precisely why we need science, precisely why we need evidence, because our intuition can be so easily fooled, and why we should not be relying on such an inadequate tool to run a global socio-economic system. And I think that's kind of the underbelly of what your talks drive at, for me anyway, how I've received them, and I think that's a very important message that people should be giving out there. So moving on to you, Yash. So what was your talk about in Rotterdam?
Right, but just before I do that, I wanted to add one thing to what Stefan is doing, is that, of course, it's great, and this humbleness that you mentioned is really, really necessary. And if anybody listening to us now would like to continue on this path of becoming more and more humble about what we perceive, I would recommend a podcast and a website called You Are Not So Smart, which is run by David McRaney. I've been listening to this guy for months now, and it's really incredible how many things we get wrong about the world around us and about our perception and the accuracy of this perception. So You Are Not So Smart. Stefan, if you don't know that, I definitely recommend you that. It will help you out with your presentation, and for everybody who is listening also.
Awesome. I didn't know about that. I'm going to check that out. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, he has written 2 books. You Are Not So Smart. You Are Not So Smart, and the other one, You Are Now Less Dumb, I think. So they are both very telling by the title.
I love those titles. They're fantastic. In fact, the really funny thing is that I keep threatening to write a book with an extremely similar title. So now that I know that's out there, I don't know, maybe I'll either add to it or just not bother, because it sounds great. I look forward to checking it out.
Yes, and as for my presentation, I have chosen a topic of connected also with psychology, but more from an evolutionary perspective and from a much broader perspective. And this topic was actually chosen with my friend. We together worked on this presentation. He is a psychologist, and I'm the mouth. I think I speak, and he provides the content for the presentation. And the topic was the modern tribal structures, which, well, not to spoil too much, means that although we have moved so far past our caveman history or prehistory, and we now live in big centers for humans called the cities, where millions of us live on a very tight space, we are in fact still the same primitive hunter-gathering, roaming humans that we were about 200,000 years ago, because this is when the anatomically modern humans have evolved with their brain wiring and their urges and their needs and their desires and their reactions. And these all things that I've just spoken about have evolved within a tribal context, because humans could not survive on their own now, and they could not have survived on their own in the past. So we needed other people around us to guard us while we sleep, to help us gather food, to help us fend off predators, and many other things. And in my presentation, I actually dive much deeper into the psychology of all that, bringing different researchers and studies by such people as Professor Dunbar or Helen Fisher or Robert Sapolsky, that is quite well known here in the Zeitgeist movement circles. All these guys talk about the evolutionary perspective of, for example, the fact that humans are unable to maintain a meaningful relationship with more than about 150 people, and there is a strong scientific evidence behind that, and also that people have evolved into 4 broad different temperament types. This is the study by Helen Fisher, and these 4 different temperament types, called the explorer, the builder, the negotiator, and the director, complement one another, and without people around us, this kind of a group or tribe, as I like to call it, anyone, regardless of their temperament type, will not be able to fully kind of use their potential and even achieve full happiness. We are social species, and there's quite a lot of interesting studies that tell us in great detail how social we are and how tribal, in fact, we are. And my presentation was trying to bring this to light and convince people that having people around them and having meaningful relationship with them, like we used to do, back in the good old days, 200,000 years ago, is actually a good thing and not a step back.
Well, I think that's I would say another extremely important message to get across, because with the individualism that is promoted by the market system and the breakdown of family structures by modern schooling and the job workplace, and essentially keeping us separated and more narcissistically obsessed about our own self-image, and that, and all these sorts of things that have been created because, well, ultimately, I think they sell. They sell better if people are like that. Not that that's some nefarious architectural intention by some nefarious elite. It's just that's what our system tends to promote. So I think people need to understand that relationship is more important than anything else, and it's all you're going to have. All you're going to have left, and at the end of anything. And that's what we should be going for. I think is very important, and to draw that back into our modern way of life and say that, what, this actually isn't natural, it's just what we've arrived at, I think is very important for me. That's what I took from it anyway. To carry on, my talk on the day was regarding public speaking. Obviously, we are a communication movement. The Zeitgeist movement, that is, we're not particularly an action movement. We are there to provide a sort of pivot point, I suppose, for people who maybe don't join the dots of why things out there in the world are not working. Because we like to think in buckets, as Robert Sapolsky calls it. We like to think in things of compartmentalized different parts, whereas actually that relationship between everything, I think, is incredibly important to understand. So that's why we focus on communication and a value shift. And if we're going to do that, I think we actually all need to be very good public speakers, and we need to be confident in doing that, and we need to be versatile and realize that the message that the movement promotes and the train of thought that we promote is for everyone. Of all different shapes, sizes, creeds, cultures, and backgrounds. So I focused on doing a workshop-esque delivery where people came to the stage and gave a brief talk to their own select different groups, and we had some very interesting choice. We had a group of butchers. We had a group of bankers. I think there was a church congregation, possibly in there, and some various other amusing sort of groups, and some different choices that people chose in their own little networked groups to talk to, with the idea of being how we could focus our attention on appealing to whatever cause that they may have for our particular message, and trying to deliver it through the prism of what they were interested in. And the feedback I got back from the session was certainly very positive. I enjoyed doing it more rather than just talking at people. I felt that getting people involved and almost using it as a training session was very beneficial, and I think that's, for me, what we have to start focusing now on it as a movement, is working with each other and getting all of our abilities well honed in whatever direction that we choose to go on. But public speaking being a very important one, we need more people doing that. And as I probably said at the beginning of this radio address, there needs to be more people talking for the movement now, which on this radio show and elsewhere. So I think that it's a very important subject to go for. So we're moving on to Rotterdam, and back to you, Stefan. What would you say were the other highlights of this meeting that we all ended up at?
Well, first of all, I think it was in and of itself an amazing event, which was put on by really relatively few people. I know Yashik had a big hand, and certainly Paulina. Please give her my deepest, sincerest love and respect again. I know I did myself, but I mean, she was an absolute gem for the whole duration of this extended weekend. And Gilbert, of course, our EU coordinator, also did a remarkable job. So first of all, that it even went as it did, that it even happened, was rather spectacular in and of itself. And I also have to give credit to the people at this building that where we were. Because I think they've done amazingly well in revitalizing an old, almost condemned building and doing stuff on a social level. I'm not going to go into details about that, because you should probably have a radio show with those people talking about that, because that's very interesting, and for a whole show in and of itself. I think you should do that, James. But let's get back on point here. I think that the event was very successful, all things considered. But also that we have a lot to learn about how we organize and how we get better at using each other in a positive way. It was my feeling that there were a rather small number of people who were sort of overworked, and that's really stupid considering where we're coming from, and that we all understand that we're in this together and we're here to help each other. So I think next time we should definitely have a bigger roster of people that are chipping in and volunteering with all the practical stuff. But for me, it was very interesting to revisit a lot of people that I haven't seen in a long time, and also meet new people from all around the world. You know, everybody's pretty much on the same pace. Also meeting some of the other people that were there. They had this convention there before we arrived. Maybe you can talk a little about that, James. And some of the people had stayed on to meet us. They'd heard that we were coming, and that was very interesting. I think we made great connections with like-minded people, again, from all around the world, that maybe come at it from different directions, but we definitely share a lot of common ground with a lot of these people. So all in all, I think it was a very successful event, and I think we can learn some of the stuff that wasn't so successful, but all in all, it was great, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Yeah, I wasn't too familiar with the event that happened before, but certainly the space that we were using was incredible. It beggars belief, really. Apparently, it's an old Masonic lodge, which I thought was beautifully ironic. But it was really good, and actually that was one of the highlights of it. Just what's been able to be achieved by the Rotterdam chapter, who have taken over a legion of unused buildings. But as you said, that's probably the subject for another radio show. Please, by all means, do take over the reins of that radio show yourself, and give them a shout and see if they want to do it. I'm a little pushed for time as it is, which was one of the conversations we had in a very practical meeting towards the end of the weekend, which I felt was the most beneficial, where notes were taken about who was going to do what. It's very lovely to get together and have interactions and meet new people. Like you said, I think that's absolutely critical. But sometimes what gets lost in that is actually the business end, which is sitting down and people saying, "I'll do this, I'll do that, let's do this." You actually putting down names, putting down emails, so that there's recourse for these things. That is actually how movements, social or otherwise, actually take the next step. So that was for me a very, very positive, a positive part of the weekend. Gil and Paulina, fantastic effort by everyone who put the event on, and it was really good. I had a good time and wouldn't have missed it for the world. Although I may bring earplugs with me next time to try to avoid the snoring. but no, it was.
If I may actually comment on that, because there was a funny observation that I did during this time we had in Rotterdam. At the very beginning, Gilbert in his opening speech said clearly that we have quite a bit of like we have quite a lot of rooms that we can use as our sleeping quarters, and that if anybody wants to do like go to another room and then find a place for themselves to sleep more comfortably, they're more than welcome to do so. But we, neither he nor I nor anybody else from the organizing group suggested, that we will organize it. We left it for the people to decide. And I was actually laughing aloud inside myself when I noticed that there was only one couple that came up to me and asked, Yashik, so where are these other sleeping rooms that we can go to? Because we would prefer to have a little bit more privacy and maybe a little bit more quiet when we sleep. So I showed them the rooms, and I think they were the only ones who did that, and the rest stayed in those crowded two rooms that we had from the very beginning, with all the snoring and all the commotion, happening all this time. So that was an interesting lesson that I took out from this, that on one hand, we see the need to kind of get more of those decentralized organization where we take matters into our own hands, and we kind of make the world a better place without the government and without the presidents and kings and such. But on this little scale, we still would like to be kind of taken by the hand and shown where we are supposed to be.
Yeah, well, as they say, Rome wasn't burnt in a day. It takes a while for us to change those old ingrown habits, which is of course also one of the huge topics on my agenda with regards to the brain and patterns that we are repeating. Most of them completely unbeknownst to ourselves, really. So that's very fascinating.
By the way, did you say Rome wasn't burnt in a day or built?
Well, that's kind of a local pun here. Yeah.
I like the burnt one much because it's much more interesting than the original one. And if I may add a few comments on the Rotterdam meeting, well, you've mentioned most of the important things, so I'll try to fill in just like small details. For me, the most important thing was that finally we had a time where we could spend more than a couple of hours together, and that we had time that was not so fully packed with official stuff. That we actually had a couple of days where bonds could be made and friendships could be forged. And I'm really happy that Gilbert was able to pull this off and find this place and set up the date and everything. Because I think right now the European Zeitgeist movement chapter has finally become more connected, something that we've been missing for all this time. People were just like those lone islands of activism, and now there are some kind of a synapses connecting these small brain cells. And I was also really happy to see that although there was a possibility to have like a crazy party where everybody gets drunk and loses the half of the next day due to hangover and the lack of memories from the last night, most people decided that they prefer to stay up late, but rather talking than just kind of getting themselves wasted, which is a typical behavior in our culture these days. So that was pretty an interesting and positive surprise for me. Although, of course, there was partying as well, and that was also very good because I wouldn't want that meeting to be stiff and too formal. And also, I'm happy that there were people who decided to give presentations, like not from this core organizational groups, but people who just came up to us and said that they also want to do some presentation. I'm sad that we didn't have enough time to incorporate everybody who wanted to do that, but I hope that with time, when we continue organizing these meetups in different places around the world, we will have a much better ways of organizing that so that everybody's wishes are met and that we can take even more from it. As James said that at the end, that we also have this also the get down to action part as well.
Yes, I think I shouldn't be glazed over that point of actually coming together and the idea of the program not being absolutely jam packed with just intellectualized lectures and things like that, which invariably a Z Day is about, which doesn't give you the chance to make connections with people. And that doesn't, and I don't think that helps us as a movement. I have the very good fortune of my girlfriend actually, I met her through the movement, so she shares the same values and frustrations, and I equally know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who does not share those values, and I can say that that situation is a lot more difficult and certainly a lot more lonely when you sort of think about things a certain way, and so it was lovely to share time with like-minded people and discuss topics that we find actually interesting. Sometimes I hope I speak for everyone, where sometimes you're in a regular conversation and I don't know, the weather crops up, or you're going to talk about things. You're not allowed to talk about politics or religion because they're just too uncomfortable for people in popular discourse, and it's just like, well, they're the only things that interest me, so everything else is a bit boring. That's my idea of a good night, is having a drink with some people who actually think about these things and who maybe have a different opinion, or or something to offer, and like to talk about it. So that's what the weekend brought home for me. So I think that's probably a good place to round things up. Personally, would you guys like to say any sort of parting words to the audience out there?
Well, I guess the thing that I always keep reminding myself is the patience bit, like because we're in it for the long haul, if you will, with this movement. It's not going to happen overnight, and I've seen people burn out. I've been close to doing so myself, and just remember to take everything in stride and with a smile, and find a balance out there, So you have to live in the world the way it is. So if you get too sort of depressed about it, you're not really helping anybody, least of all yourself. So remember to keep a good spirit about things, and it's probably not going to happen tomorrow. But as Jacques Fresco says, if you do nothing, nothing will happen.
Yes, and from me, I would like to say that just like with public speaking that James did a workshop of, so is with building networks and changing the world. It's just like riding a bike. Nobody can ride a bike the first time they try, but the longer you do that, the longer you practice, you can become better at this. And unlike with riding a bike, you can actually do it in a group with people who support you. So what I would encourage everybody to do, everybody, especially those who have listened to what we were talking about, have heard about the Rotterdam meetup and could not come for whatever reasons, is that, it was not a special event. It was a very ordinary event organized by pretty normal, typical people who just happen to be motivated enough to just not give up at the first sight of trouble, and who were trying to find the possibility to organize that meeting. And so can you. And if you don't know how, you can always contact any one of us or somebody else in the movement. And even if the first person doesn't help you enough, then you can continue with another and another and another. Eventually you'll find somebody who you will be able to organize such a meeting with. And I hope that with time, it will not be the Rotterdam meetup will actually be forgotten, because we will have so many other meetups planned and happening in all over Europe and other places in the world, that we will just be ecstatic with the possibilities that have opened because we did something. So be active, don't give up, and build up a team and network of people who can help you with that.
I think that's fantastic advice, and I fully concur. I like what you were saying as well about this phenomenal effort actually came from a group of people who went, right, let's do this. And from the point at which they said, let's do this, there wasn't no problems and everything went completely smoothly and they got to the finish line. Yeah, there were problems, but it depends on how you look at them. I like a translation of the word problem in a particular language I can't recall at the moment is actually called opportunity. I quite like that. I think that sort of sums up what we need to be thinking about out there, and precisely why I'm sort of asking everybody for contributions to this radio station, because I've realised I've given an awful lot of radio shows now. For some time, it has actually been me holding the helm, and I would really like some contributions from other people. And I still sometimes get a message from people saying, "Oh, you should interview this guy," and I always message people back politely saying, with all due respect, why don't you do it? You know? And they say, "Oh, I couldn't possibly." Well, that's because you haven't done it yet. Once upon a time, I hadn't done it, and that's how you do things, because you do them, and then you get better at them from screwing up and getting better, and that's kind of something that just I think has to be accepted. But I think some of the reason it happens is the bystander effect. Is there'll be someone else to do it. Someone else will organise Rotterdam. Someone else will, do this, and we can sort of stand by the bylines and say the Zeitgeist movement should do this. The Zeitgeist movement should do that. The Zeitgeist movement is you. That's what we have to sort of, start to really ingrain into our brains. Is that, and before asking someone else, can we actually do it ourselves? And if we can't, by all means make a suggestion. This should be a team effort. But I think we have to let go of that habit that says, let's leave it to someone else, and actually start to realise that, as Stefan said, whilst striking a balance, there are some things that we should try to actually take upon ourselves and do if we want to see a change in the world. So thanks very much for being on, guys. It's been a pleasure to speak to you as always, and I'm sure that we will speak again at some point in the future soon. Thanks very much, and take care. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for having us, James.
I always wondered why somebody didn't do something about that. Then I realized I am somebody, and I think this is the best thing you can take of as an activist.
I wish I'd said that rather than that great big long rant I went on. Superb. Thanks, Yash.
Thank you very much for this possibility to talk. Thanks. Cheers.